everybody, welcome to Superhuman Customs. I'm Stephen Human. Today we're gonna do something a little bit different. I am working on more incomplete action figures right now than I ever have before. Like, I've got a slew. I'm working on a Superman 1 million with a head that I'm not quite, sure about. I've got a Black Adam that I got for $6 that we're gonna do a paint job on. I got a guy who's gonna eventually be an Electro Superman. I've got a Kong Keenan figure. I mean, I'm working on all these things, and I don't like doing that because then it gets overwhelming. Instead it's overwhelming, I decided not to do that this week. We're gonna do something a little bit different. We are gonna work on some Dungeons and Dragons figures, on some of the little miniatures, right? So Sam and I have been doing this. We've been playing D&D. I play with my friends, and we've been working on different characters. And what we're gonna do today is we've got some dragons. And so we're just gonna do a paint job on these dragons. It's gonna be a little bit different than what we usually do, but I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. Sam and I are gonna be working together. And I've got one I accidentally spray painted this chrome. I grabbed the wrong paint. Seriously, that's what happened. I grabbed the wrong paint. And he ended up being chrome when I sprayed him and was like, dang it, well, we'll experiment. And then I primed these other ones. So we've got 4 dragons. I'm gonna do 2, Sam's gonna do 2. We're gonna play with different techniques. We're gonna make them look awesome. So hopefully you will stick around for something just a little bit different today. Sam's gonna start us out.
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm starting with the base coat of the red. And then once I'm done with that, I think I'll, I don't know what to do next. I like it because I can make them like however I want. And like I follow what they usually look, but I also like add different details that I want them to have to make them different.
While Sam is painting his dragon, I wanted to start on mine. Now, this is a trick that I learned from a friend of mine. So this is a vitamin bottle or a pill bottle. You can use the same thing, but the tops swivel like this. So you put a little bit of the sticky tack on there, and you have freedom to spin this around while you're painting. It was genius. Thank you, Mike Johnson, for teaching me that. What I'm gonna do that's different from what Sam's doing is I'm gonna start with a lighter red. So this red is much more liquidy because I want to see if I can have some of the silver stand out. Because remember, when I primed these, I messed up. Sam got the fully primed one, and I got the one that I accidentally grabbed, the chrome paint. So I'm going to put a lighter, I'm going to use it almost like a wash. I'm going to try and move it around a lot to make it so that it is very light so that it stays metallic. That's what I'm after. I want to have this base coat really stand out much more than I normally would on this red dragon. Now, all of these are going to be red dragons, but we have freedom. I'm giving Sam the freedom to do really whatever he wants, and I will do the same. And I'm doing the same thing on this guy, but he's been primed just normally, so he will look a little bit different than the silver one, but that will give each of them a distinct look, which is what we're going for. And what we'll do is, obviously I'm starting with the red, which will be the darkest part of the dragon, and then we'll lighten him up from there with maybe some gold and some more metallics just to add details.
I am painting the horns and like the little spikes on the wings. I'm painting them black because it makes them look better, and also I like the details.
So you can see the difference already with the silver versus the base. This one's much more of a matte red, while this one does have the metallic. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna start going through with just some gunmetal gray. I love some of the silver on here. I'm gonna put it out much more as a wash than anything else so that I can just start to catch some of these details. We've got the base color, we want them to be red. We're gonna lighten up from here before we put on our final wash. So remember, when you're in here, just dust it, because we just want to hit some of these scales. That's all we're doing with some of these layers. Like, I'm gonna go through a gold layer next with this gunmetal gray. I'm just going through and accenting some of this stuff. That's it. When it comes to D&D figures, the little details really make a big difference. So when you're going through and doing your washes, hitting the edges of things is very important, because it'll just make them stand out. Like here, the sort of fingers on the wings. Just going through lightly with the gunmetal gray and hitting those. And obviously we're gonna accent it with different colors. I'm gonna come back with the gold, but just even going over and moving stuff around like this, just really quick. It catches the texture on the wings just enough. Look at what Sam's done with this one. He's done some bone white on it. Well, he went through the other one with the black. He's just hitting those claws and stuff. See, hitting those little details, it does so much to make these guys stand out. All right, back to mine. Next thing we're gonna do is gold. Do the same thing that I did with the gunmetal gray. I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna move it around. So if I get some in some places, I'm gonna treat it like a wash at first. I even add a little bit of water to the paintbrush, just a little. Then I'll wipe with my fingers just in case it gets too much. But you can start to see that it accents those scales. It starts to lighten them up a little bit. Also gives them a nice sheen. And the great thing about doing these D&D figures, characters, the dragons, whatever, is that you can do whatever you want. You're not going off of a comic book or on what somebody else thinks it should look like. These get to be yours, because that's the joy of Dungeons and Dragons, is that it can, in fact, and should be whatever you want. I'm the DM on my games, and sometimes I'll alter things or whatever to give the guys more of a challenge or whatever we need to do in order to make the experience fun. That's what we're doing.
In the pictures in the D&D Monster Manual, it shows that on the back of the wings it's sort of charred. So what I did with mine is I also made it so that it's kind of charred. I also added bone white to the horns and just like the claws. And I'm also doing the bone white to the underbelly.
Now I'm going to do a little bit of the same. I'm going to use a little bit of the bone white and I'm going to hit the teeth with a smaller brush. And just add some of these little details going in here. Remember, you start out dark, you go lighter, and then you end with a nice detailed wash, which we'll do in just a minute. One thing I really like to do is when I go with the lighter colors, I like to dab in some areas like on the horns, so that it's just kind of hitting some of the things. You'll find that doing that really does make a huge difference in how things look. It makes them look a little bit more random, a little bit less like, hey, I painted this, and more, I'm just going through and nature did a lot of this stuff. So that's the great thing about dragons and a lot of these characters, is that you're able to really make it look a little bit more natural than you otherwise would. Remember, when it comes to these little figures, contrasting colors do a really big deal. So like I'm going through with the bone white and I'm just hitting the little fingers on his wings. Now this will get muted a little bit when I put on the wash, but for right now, and even then, it's going to stand out really nicely and just make it so that you can tell that these are just a different material. They're a different, either bone or they're something. So don't be afraid to do really deep contrasting colors when you're doing these guys, because it will make a big difference. So before we do the wash, I'm going to go through with a little bit more of the red and just go over the top. I put a little bit of blue for some veins, and now I'm just going through with the red and deadening some of this so that it won't be quite so stark. Remember, we're doing this all in layers, and so when you go over the layers, you can still see some of this other stuff, and it just makes it look more like flesh, and it just really adds a lot of texturing. So don't be afraid to add some really light layers of the base coat over the top before you do a wash or any kind of black or anything like that. Sam's moving on to the wash. We're just using our Vallejo game wash. In fact, all we've been doing is just using Vallejo paints. I think we had a yellow Citadel and that was it. Everything else was just a base Vallejo that we got from a game store. That's it, nothing special. With these little figures, the wash makes a huge deal because there's so many little details you just can't get. In fact, a lot of guys will refer to this type of wash as liquid talent because it hits all of the little spots that you just can't get because they're so tiny. So a wash on these characters is absolutely necessary. Before I do the wash, I'm gonna go through and I'm just gonna add a little bit of black detailing in here in some places. It'll stand out when I do the wash, and it will make it just a little bit more, some of these areas just a little bit more interesting to me. I don't always do that, but in this case I'm going to, because I think it's going to look really cool. All right, it's time for the wash. I like to put it on thick, because then it gets into everywhere. And then I'll take some toilet paper and I'll dab. And that will take it off of the top layer and leave it in all of the detailed parts, which is what I want. This one, the wash is standing out particularly nicely because it has so many veins, so many little lines in the wings. And so the wash is getting in there, and then I'm able to wipe it off and it stays in those little cracks. And so this one for sure is benefiting from the wash. The metallic one, I'm not so sure if it did a whole lot because it was already so metallic and textured, but this one for sure is benefiting. And lastly, once you do the wash, if you want, you can go through with the red again and just hit some of these edges, and it will make that red pop a little bit more if you feel that it's been deadened too much by the wash, which sometimes it does. And so you want to go through on some of these edges and just crisp up the red, and it'll just add another layer of goodness and of contrast and really make the dragon look really cool. And we're finished. How was that, Sam?
It was fun.
It was fun. So this is a really great thing to do. They're simple. They cost like $5 at your local hobby shop, and you and your son or daughter can spend a couple hours and paint, and they can do what they want and you can do what you want, and then you can use them in a game. It's a ton of fun. We've been painting together for the last few months and just buying different figures and just experimenting, because they can be anything you want. They can be your character, they can be somebody else's character, whatever. But it is just really, really cool. Sam, you did an awesome job. See, go out and have some fun. I'm Steve Human. This is Sam Human. He's 12 years old, just in case you were wondering, and he's an awesome little painter. So paint with your kids, have fun. Next week we'll have another action figure. But I thought this was a really fun thing to do. So, Steve Human, Superhuman Customs. Check out my novels at stephenhuman.com, and we'll see you next week.